G'day Bomber fans, hope we've all had a good start to the week. We have had quite a few days to dwell over that disastrous loss to Port Adelaide. Our attention now turns to this Friday night. We take on the Dogs. This is a massive game. I feel like it could really turn the fan base one of two ways. We need some sort of response after that bad loss, and if we don't get one, we should really be worried. Tough game coming up, big review, but first some votes from last game to get through. Alrighty, only a handful of good players from that game. Mackay was best on ground, 6 votes. Merritt and Caldwell get 2 each, so do Gresham and Jones, who feature in both our tallies. There was a pretty clear agreement from you guys as to who deserved what. No one was really that close to featuring. The overall tally has Merritt on top, ahead of Ben Mackay by 1 vote. Below is a bit of a cluster with fellow new signing Jade Gresham up pretty high. McGrath and Perkins round out the top 5, but it's anyone's game, only 4 weeks in, but Merritt does have a narrow lead. Alrighty, so Essendon versus the Dogs, Marvel Stadium, Friday night. Should be a decent crowd in, hopefully, unless that last result scared a few of us off. Both clubs are 2 from 4, but the Dogs look a lot better than we do from their games, and typically we are very poor on Friday nights. The last time we won a Friday night game was in 2022, and we have an average losing margin of over 50 points from our last 3 games, and we're also typically poor against the Bulldogs, as we all know, but I don't need to tell you guys about that. They're a bit of a bunny side for us. They're going in as favourites, and it's clear to see why, so let's talk about our opponents, the Bulldogs, a team that is fairly hard to get a read on in season 2024 so far. Well, I say they're hard to get a read on, but they're very predictable. They beat the teams they should soundly and lose to those better than them. The only thing is we don't know where each team sits because it's so early into the season. They really struggled against the Demons, and they were not far off upsetting the Cats at Gather Round. They are a midfield powerhouse, possessing some of the best in the game through the engine room. They are quite a fun team to watch at their best as well. They're high scoring, defensively lacking, but they make up for it with the sheer amount of avenues to goals back the other way. They're a finals contender. They have a list that suggests they should be featuring in September, and they're very consistent with their results. As I said, they beat those who they should, they lose to those who are better than them, which is what makes this a bit of a gauge for us. This will tell us where we sit after 5 rounds, whether we should turn our attention to finals or if we will be sitting further down the ladder. So what should we expect from this game of footy? Well, unfortunately for us, this is going to start in the midfield, and they are genuinely stacked there. If we thought Port were good, we don't know what we have in store for us Friday night. Our struggling ruck duo will have to go up against the reigning All-Australian Tim English, their biggest test so far. He is unreal, stoppage specialist that roams around the ground so effectively as well. And even if we do somehow manage to nullify his impact through Draper and Goldstein, we have to deal with Liberatore, who had a whopping 19 clearances against the Cats, Bontempelli, who is, in my opinion, the best midfielder in the game, and Adam Treloar, who is averaging more of the footy than Merritt right now. And while they have that going for them, we just posted 6 centre clearances against Port. We were completely butchered in the guts. We were embarrassing, showing what a good midfield looks like. And on Friday night, we could well face the music again. I'm really worried about this matchup. There has to be drastic changes to our midfield layout if we want to get remotely close to the Bulldogs in the guts on Friday night. It only gets worse now with Setterfield and Perkins now missing. If we play like we did against Port, it could get really ugly, and that isn't even me being dramatic after a bad loss. This is me being realistic. Last year, the Dogs had 20 more clearances than us. In 2022, they had over 25 more inside 50s than us. It's a common theme with Essendon and the Dogs, us getting bullied by their bigger midfield. If we look like we did against Port, expect another massive belting. Let's say we do manage to break even in the guts. From there, I think we have a major advantage because the Bulldogs' defence isn't all that crush hot. It's undersized. They got a former general forward in Buku Karmas playing on opposition tall forwards now. They have good ball users, but they're leaky, and the structure isn't what it was a few years back. Teams can score against the Dogs and score quite freely if on top. I think their average points against is a bit hard to read because they've played West Coast and Gold Coast in Ballarat, but the Demons and Cats showed us that defence, it can be easy to navigate. Now, those are proper good footy teams, unlike us right now, so it's tough to know where we sit. So we'd have to play out of our skin to get close to their numbers, but we have shown we have the ability to score fast as well this year. Not so much in our last 2 games without Peter Wright, but that's a good test for us because this isn't going to be a low-scoring game. Both teams aren't going to be quiet in front of goals. We will need to put on a game-winning score without Wright. If we only manage 10 or 11 goals like we have the last few weeks, we lose. This has triple-figure game written all over it in my eyes. Those 2 leaky teams going up against each other on a Friday night on a typically high-scoring ground, we should be expecting a fairly high score. I think if we're going to win, it will probably be from defensive transition, resorting back to our 2023 ways, because that hasn't really been our bread and butter so far this year. Up until last week, we'd been scoring most of our goals from the centre square, but that's not going to be happening on Friday against the Dogs. We will be looking to score from defensive change, something we're used to doing in the last few seasons. It helps that we have been taught to play off the back foot after years of midfield mediocrity. For this to happen, we need to be sound down back. We will undoubtedly be losing the inside 50 column. I would love to be proven wrong, but I think that's a fact. So we, for starters, starters, we need to deal with the inside 50s that come our way, shut out as many attacks as possible, and then we need to be slick on the rebound. Try our best to carve them up through the likes of Martin and McGrath, who have been good this year. We need Redmond to step up because he has been disappointing, in my opinion. Just like Samson, he's lost his strength. I think if the game plays out like we expect it to, our backs will be the most important players, their ball use in particular, because that was a real issue when we played them last year. It was stagnant and boring. This time around, we need to show real promise. Just rewinding a bit onto our back six, this is a bit of a danger game for them. I really like Mackay. As you know, I thought he was best on ground against Port, as did you guys, but he isn't the type of forward that you can easily contain an Aaron Norton with. He is big, he is strong, Norton is mobile and athletic, and Ugle-Hagan is in a similar boat. The Dogs don't really have strong forwards like Dixon or Hawkins for Mackay to shut down. They have keys that separate themselves from their opponents, and unfortunately for our back six right now, it's not really capable of defending that if the ball is down there for most of the night, because we're missing some players that would usually be playing those roles. Norton and Ugle-Hagan against Mackay, Laverty and Cox, and then of course there is Cody Waitman on ground level, who is a fantastic player. He loves to play against us. Say what you want about him, but he is great. He's in All-Australian form. He loves to kick a bag against the Bombers, so there are some real worries for us in the back half of the field. If there are 60 odd inside 50s, I think the Dogs manage 25 or more scoring shots. We need to do one of two things as a team: limit the amount of territory they get up the field and limit the amount of chances they get inside 50. The Dogs have been a good transitioning team as well, which is annoying for us. They aren't just good in the guts at winning the contested ball. They are right up the top front contested possessions as well. They have always been a team that gets a lot of the ball and puts it in dangerous areas. They're a team that could really do damage on the counter, which is an issue for us because it looks like our ways of scoring could be limited if the Dogs are on, but they seem to have heaps of avenues to goal. I've always found them to be a very difficult team to contain from stoppages around the ground in particular. They've always been really good at getting those contested ground ball gets out to space and killing you from there. I actually think they're better at transitioning through those areas than from defensive 50. It's not how we usually get carved up, but it's certainly a way for them to carve us up. Just a danger area I think we should be watching out for. I spoke about this with Sydney, but I think a team is only as good as its worst players. It's how those bottom tier guys perform that really dictates the game. So we need players like Jai Menzies and Jake Kelly, even Davey if he plays, whoever plays, those fringe members, we need them to be somewhat effective because the Dogs have a really deep list. Jack McRae was their sub against the Cats. He's an All-Australian midfielder. And then they have guys like Bramble and Riley West and Lathan Vandermeer, Oscar Baker. They're not bad players in the slightest, but they aren't stars of the team, and all of them manage to have a real impact week in, week out. We need our B to C tier players to be performing like them, doing their role, because we have too many floaters right now. It's frustrating when you shut down Liberatore or Bontempelli and Treloar and then have to deal with a rampaging Riley Sanders or a hard-running Bailey Williams or even a sturdy Taylor Dre down back. It's a really deep list they have. It's why many think they should be firmly set inside the 8. And it goes without saying, but we just need to show up, be real hard at the contest, physical footy. I'm not going to say Essendon edge because that is baloney, but we need to at least play like we have some form of edge for a weekend. There is one way to ensure this is an easy walkover, and that's turn up not wanting to win the game. We play like we did against St Kilda, or even that first term against Port. We could be in with a fight. If we play like we did for the rest of that game against Port Adelaide, we probably lose the game. We definitely lose the game. Danger players for both teams. For us, Nick Martin's the big one. I think this is a huge opportunity for him because he's been getting heaps of the ball, but his impact hasn't been that good with it. I think this is the time he shows us how good he can be off halfback. A really important game for our defenders, as I said. Darcy Parish, he needs to bounce back. He was shocking against Port. We're all keen to see him in 2024, and so far, it hasn't been what we expected. This is a really important game for him and our undersized midfield. And finally, Sam Draper, another in need of a bounce back. He's our barometer in a lot of ways. We need him to get on top in the ruck. We need physicality. That's the guy who can bring it. For them, I don't know where to begin. Liberatore, the clearance machine, he could be a real worry. Feeding the pill to outside runners. A bit basic, but Bontempelli, he's the best in the comp for a reason. And a bit of a rogue shout, Sam Darcy. I think he's probably going to be on Nick Cox for most of the night. He looked really good against the Cats. This is a guy that could easily pop up for a few goals that we can't afford to concede while we're struggling to keep Norton and Ugle-Hagan down. So Cox will need to be on his A game on Friday. Team news. For us, a few troublesome injuries. Setterfield and Perkins are both injured. One will be replaced by Sam Durham. You would think the other would be replaced by Elijah Sartas. Out of form players like Menzies will probably keep their spot due to lack of options. That is unless we elect to bring in Archie Roberts, who's been good in the VFL but maybe a bit raw, or Alan Davey Jr., who hasn't been as good in the VFL. And for the Dogs, not too much should change. Ryan Gardner is nursing a foot complaint, but really it should be a relatively similar team to what we saw against the Cats. Realistically, we probably shouldn't win this game. I think if all goes according to script, the Dogs get the win. They are the better team right now. They're the more consistent team. They have the better list. There is every possibility for an upset, don't get me wrong. I think we will come into the game hungry, but I am not going to predict the Bombers based on what I saw last week. It would have to be the most optimistic fan to believe we're winning this game. I don't think it's going to be a walkover. I think we can win for sure, but I think the Dogs are just far too strong in the midfield for us and too capable of scoring for us to keep up with them. The Bulldogs by 25 on Friday night. I really hope I'm wrong and the boys respond, but I just can't predict them to win after what we just saw. Leave your predictions down below. That is that. Maybe a bit of a pessimistic preview, but what can you expect? Get out to the game if you can. Don't give up on the boys just yet. Show some support. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and go Bombers.